Hello, everyone, and welcome to Common Knowledge. My name is Kyle Novus, and I am your host, and I am joined today by my co-host, Manny Mraz. How are you doing today, Manny?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing, Kyle?
I am excellent. I'm so glad that you asked. And you know why I'm excellent?
Why?
Because I was just on legitmtg.com, and I saw that both of our podcasts are on there.
It's
So
like we've finally made it.
we really have. So, if you want to support us, you could do that by supporting our sponsor, Legit MTG. If you are looking for singles for your standard deck, for your modern deck, legacy, pauper, or anything in between, please check out Legit MTG. They also have awesome content like ours that you can check out any day of the week.
Yeah, tons of sweet content. Every format you can think of, and their variety of singles is huge. And to top all of that off, they have $2 shipping on all orders.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I was looking on there earlier today. They are really good with foils. Like, they have a lot. So if you're looking to foil out a deck, that's definitely the place to go. So,
Indeed.
this week, moving right along into the episode itself, Manny and I are going to be talking about a topic that is near and dear to our hearts, and that is brewing a deck in this format. So, the reason that we kind of decided that we wanted to go ahead and do this is that uh, Manny and I have both kind of felt the need to brew decks lately. We've seen a few decks that we feel could be optimized or changed slightly to make something better.
Yeah, there's definitely that, and the fact that some of these decks don't necessarily fit our play styles. We prefer to play a different way, utilizing the same kind of strategy, using a lot of the same kind of cards that are popular right now in Pauper.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of part of what we're going to be getting into. But the first part of brewing in this format that I kind of pinpointed, and you might disagree with me, Manny, is finding an inspiration. So
What do you mean?
finding an inspiration. So for me, I think that
Yeah,
this
I
is
mean, like,
multiple things. You can be looking through like MTG Goldfish, and you can see a deck list that just top aided the Pauper Challenge and think, wow, I would really like to build this. And that's your impetus to build that deck. You could also see the deck and be like, hey, I could change this and make it better. You could see a
sure.
card interaction and decide, I want to build something around this. You could see an existing archetype, want to see what happens if you shift the colors. Or you could be
Mhm.
finding a mechanic that you really like and deciding that, hey, let's explore this and see if there's something there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I would actually very much agree with that. I think for me, my inspiration is typically when I'm playing a deck and I just go, you know what, this could be better. I could make this better. Maybe that's a little bit arrogant, but I mean, that's somebody said that to themselves at some point at the beginning of every deck that's popular in a meta.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. It's always going to start with somebody. So every opportunity that you have to brew is really fantastic. I was actually listening to a video because I very rarely watch videos. I tend to be multitasking. Um, and the person was talking about how many opportunities they take to brew a deck and how many of them actually fail. And
Oh,
it's like ridiculous. He was basically saying that
yeah,
only about 25% are things that I would even want to show other people, and 25% of those are ones that actually work.
right. Yeah. And I completely agree with that. I mean, I would say it's much worse than that for myself. Out of all of the decks I've brewed, only one of them has been actually competitive. Of the others, some of them have been all right.
Yeah. So the numbers aren't always in our favor when we're trying to brew. We don't always get it right, but we still keep doing it. When it comes to finding a core, I know for myself, I usually see an archetype that I like in another format, and I
Yes.
think to myself, hey, how can I make this work in this format? And we'll be going
Right.
over one such deck a little bit later, but I end up doing that, or I'm also infamous for seeing like a one or two card interaction and being like, well, this has to work somewhere, and
Yeah.
exploring that.
And I think one of the really great things about Pauper is that it's inexpensive, but it's on top of that, it's also an eternal format, which is so great. You have so much inspiration to take from modern, legacy, probably not vintage as much, but you have a lot of data really from these other formats that you can transfer over and use in Pauper. I mean, one of the decks we're going to be talking about today, you brewed yourself, Infect, has seen tier one and really competitive play in just about every format. We know it's a tried and true, very powerful strategy. The interactions are wonderful, and that you have something there. You just need to fine tune it and really baby it and take care of it to really create something.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in this format, Infect did have its days before Invigorate was banned. Once
Right.
Invigorate was banned, then things kind of went downhill. But it's about finding and tuning something so that it works in the current meta.
Right.
So that's kind of how you find your inspiration. And once you have this inspiration and you have this gleam of hope and joy and excitement in your eyes, uh, usually what I end up doing, because typically you are at a pretty good point with this stuff. Usually, you aren't just building something from scratch. You have some kind of reference deck list to go from. Um, but let's say that you didn't have a reference deck list. If you just had an interaction of sorts,
Okay.
where do you usually start looking for cards that you might want to put in a deck if you just have something as simple as an interaction before you?
So where I will begin, I'll use the other deck that we brewed for this segment. So we decided to do a Tron. So Dinrova Tron was something I was playing this last week, and I absolutely hated it. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like it. I didn't think the cards were very good in it. So Kyle and I said, let's do Green Red Tron. It's tried, it's proven, it's a wonderful strategy. It's really good. You have access to things like Ancient Stirring, Expedition Map, Chromatic Sphere. You really have the core of the deck is exactly the same. So we said to ourselves, like, well, what do we lose and what do we need to replace it with? So little by little, we started, searching for those cards. And part of how you begin to fill out the rest of a deck, discover it, what I do personally, is I will search the majority of decks in that meta, cards that are legal, in a specific color, where those cards have been successful, they're competitive, they see a lot of play across multiple decks in that format, and it gives you a good baseline to see, what's hot fire. We're seeing obviously, lightning bolt, firebolt. We're seeing incinerate. We're seeing a lot of things like that where we know these cards are good. All we need to do is test and make sure that they're going to be good in our deck.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the great thing about brewing just about any deck. When you are looking for the core cards, like with Tron, chances are somebody has already kind of found those for you. You've found the the ancient stirrings in Tron. Like
Right.
you
Yeah.
aren't really replacing that, or Expedition Map in Tron. There are cards that are going to be in it no matter what, and that's a fantastic place to start when you're brewing a deck. If you find that you're brewing something that doesn't really have a home archetype yet, the best advice that I can have for you is to look for that archetype, see where the effect would fit. If it's just a one or two card thing, then you're going to go ahead and look for, like, okay, if I have some kind of counter spell shenanigans that I'm going to be doing, what does this work well in? Control decks. So you start looking at control options. And same thing with aggressive creatures, mid-rangey kind of grindy strategies, things like that. It's very easy to just go ahead and put it in its own sector.
Right.
Otherwise, if you just have a whole clump of cards, then I find that it's usually pretty easy. If that's your clump of cards, well, that's your clump of cards. If you have a lot of interactions to work with, then run with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Totally.
I guess once you have some of your core cards picked out, once you have that list picked out, I guess what I like is kind of what Manny said. Has someone else done this before is usually the question that you have to go ahead and ask yourself. Because if someone's done it before and someone's made something at least similar, it's easier to work from that than to try and work from scratch.
Right.
Because I know I've done this before. I've tried to work from scratch on like a tried and true strategy, and usually you just end up with something suboptimal. You miss something important, and it doesn't work out.
Right. Yeah. The current deck that you're trying to improve upon or rebuild has become the deck it has through multiple iterations of multiple hands of people, putting their slight touches on it, input here, what's successful, what isn't. So I guess the way I would look at it is from almost an engineering perspective where, when somebody designs a car, they don't typically design a car from the ground up with every single piece, redesigning, not even redesigning, but designing a brand new type of engine. Everybody works off of what's come before them and what's successful, and they improve upon it.
Yeah, absolutely. And an excellent place to go is to kind of look back and see past iterations. If something was different in it because of something in the meta, if this has changed for some reason now to answer the question of why. And the more information that you can get on why has this deck adapted in different ways over the years, the better off you're going to be creating your iteration of the deck to adapt to the meta that you are currently in and the meta that you're trying to beat.
Hmm.
So once we have our core, we have that kind of all figured out. Uh, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about my method from there. And Manny, you can tell me if you do something differently, or maybe we'll find out that we kind of brew decks in the same exact way, which I find highly unlikely. Um, Once I have my core, I usually tend to go old school and actually break out a notebook. I like to write every single core card down, and I like to make about 6 or 7 iterations of the deck around that core. And if I've already decided on colors, obviously I stick with those colors, things like that. But try and make them as different as possible. And sometimes I'll see that, okay, this one doesn't work or that one doesn't work right off the bat. But that's information to bring into the future iterations. And it's usually that 6th or 7th one that is like, okay, I might be able to turn this into something. Does that sound about right, Manny? What do you usually do? Oh, I think Manny might have just gone on hiatus. So it looks like once again on this podcast, you're going to have the Kyle Novus minute. So I'm actually going to, I guess we'll continue just talking about what we do in our brewing process. Typically, when I'm in my brewing process, once I have those 6 or 7 lists, I really like to play test them as much as possible. Uh, Usually, once I've play tested them, I have a pretty good idea of what works well in them, what doesn't, and you can kind of adjust. Uh, Usually, how I pick the cards that I go off of the core with, that I kind of glue onto it. Um, I am a big advocate for the use of magiccards.info. If you go on magiccards.info, they have a database of the entire selection of magic cards that are available, and you can search things. The search engine is a little clunky at first, but once you get to know it, you can really pinpoint certain effects that you are looking for and find out, okay, does this effect exist at this rarity, in this color, this cost, things like that. And if not, you can kind of adjust your strategy from there. And it gives you the option to look at cards that might not otherwise be used. So it looks like Manny is
Yeah, I
back.
think I am, yeah. And to comment on that, Gatherer definitely is, a very important and useful tool, albeit will end up setting.
Yeah, I think I actually end up using magiccards.info quite a bit. I find that their search engine's pretty good. Gatherer is also another excellent choice, but you're able to find those possibilities. What you need to be doing when you're trying to add things onto that core is look for possibilities. And you might already have an idea if your decision is to edit a deck and kind of change it up. Maybe you already have an idea. So that's
Hmm.
going to be your possibility that you're looking at. But maybe you need some cards that you haven't seen yet to support that strategy. That's when you're ending up on magiccards.info or on Gatherer.
Right. And I think the other part of card selection is, adjusting and fine tuning your deck, playing it over and over, just getting that raw data, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and substituting, saying, oh, Lightning Bolt is an incredibly powerful card, but with how much mana I'm going to be producing in Tron, maybe Firebolt is a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly. Doing that playtesting part is extremely necessary when brewing any deck, really. If you aren't going to be playtesting the brew, you're getting some extent of experience with brewing decks, but playtesting it is really the final part of it.
Right. Yeah. If you think, you're just going to get on MTGO and you're going to slaughter and destroy and savage everybody without any kind of tuning, you're living in Fantasyland. That's most likely never going to happen. Your chances of that are so slim. You'd have to be some kind of like brewing Rain Man, right? Like 232 toothpicks, just ready to go.
Yeah, otherwise, if you can do that, then you're a genius, and you should probably contact us. And
Yeah.
let us know, because we would love to hear from you, and we would love to see some of your brews.
Yeah. And put you on the podcast and ask you for advice all the time.
Yeah, like constantly. So once you've kind of adjusted things, you basically have your finished brew. But the thing is, with playtesting and adjusting, you're almost always going to be doing that, especially when new sets come out, the card pool increases in size, the meta changes. There's so much that's going on externally to each deck that to leave things the same for too long can be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you take the modern meta now from the meta it was, a year and a half, 2 years ago, the cards you'd be playing would be completely different. It'd be totally different, right? We have things like Death's Shadow. I mean, no one's playing Delver. I never thought I'd see the day, but nobody's playing Delver.
I remember when I was looking at on I think it was MTG Salvation. There was a forum post where somebody was asking a question about Death Shadow like 2 years ago, and people basically told him that there were him or her. I'm not sure. That there's no way that this card will work. It's absolutely terrible. And now you see an entire meta defined by it, and it just
Yeah.
amazes me. And while that's kind of the highest profile example, that happens constantly. Like in this format with Mono Black Control kind of going under and disappearing for the most part, with Infect, most of its pieces getting banned and it no longer being in use. If you look back at lists from this format from a few years ago, and back when Grape Shot was legal, that was the definer of the format. But things have changed completely now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you get rid of one or two format warping cards, and that's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are kind of the highlight examples of the situation, but you are always going to have to be adjusting things because certain types of removal are going to wax and wane in effectiveness, counter spells, creatures, things like that.
Right. And I mean, not to mention the effectiveness of the strategy that you're trying to use. It may just be a very bad time in the meta to try something like Infect or Red Green Tron. And it may be something that you sideshelf for a couple months later when people aren't preparing for decks like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That is an excellent point. It's not that a brew is necessarily bad in any situation. It could have just gone through a period of time where it was kind of the target.
Right, yeah. And I mean, there's other instances touching on what I just said, but let's say, we're playing this red, green, Tron, blue brew, where we're slaughtering everyone and everything other than is that Delver. If that's the case, then maybe that's something we don't want to be playing right now until that dies down a little bit more, if it would die down a little more.
Yeah, absolutely. If it dies down a little bit more. We'll see. So what kind of tools do you like to use when you're deck building? If you're looking for inspiration, is there a website that you go to, Manny? Or when do you... I know you said that you usually get inspired when you play a deck, and it's like, I can make this better. Do you ever check out other websites just to see, like, what's out there right now and get inspired by that?
Not usually. What I tend to do is I will kind of size up the meta. I'll look at it, I'll see what's doing well, I'll try to understand why it's doing well, and then in my mind I'll formulate a game plan as to what fits the niche of what's going to defeat those strategies. That what's what cards are best against those, what colors, and try to put it together.
Yeah, so as you can tell, like Manny is definitely he has that spike mentality of beat the current meta. I sometimes just do deck building as my own exercise just because it's kind of fun. And usually I end up on websites like Tapped Out, MTG Goldfish, where people post their ideas. It's always an interesting place to go if you are looking for a fresh look, especially at archetypes that are becoming popular right now. And sometimes you get something that's completely out of left field.
I would agree that you definitely can do that, but I think I've only ever seen one or two decks on tapped out that aren't complete garbage.
I wouldn't recommend like copying the deck list.
There,
Uh,
everybody. Oh man, I think my favorite part of looking at decks on tapped out is they'll give you like, oh, went 5-0 at FNM. This thing is just savage.
which is not necessarily always the primary
So
goal here.
good, so
Yeah,
good.
but I think that it is a good place to look though if you're looking for your core.
Yeah,
That sometimes
absolutely.
people do get their core right on things like that, and we do have to be careful when we're deck building to not look at decks and see like that endorsement of it went 5-0 at FNM and immediately discount everything in the
That's
deck.
true. That's a good point. I think so. There was an associate, a friend of mine. His name's Matt. I don't remember his last name at the moment. Matt Kling. So Matt, my friend Matt Kling was playing on MTGO, and you know, he tells me, and I believe him, that he was the first guy to brew Blue White Eldrazi in Modern before it became very popular by Andrew Tenjin. And that actually Andrew Tenjin asked him a lot of questions about it, and then got the shell from him and further modified it himself and made it into a really just meta crushing deck, just savage. And I believe that there are plenty of decks like that out there that either are powerful in their own right or maybe just need a few of your own touches to make them truly great.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always that opportunity with a deck, so I would say just don't discount a shell uh, just because of its source, because it looks crazy or because it has a weird endorsement of sorts on it. Um, it's always good to look at it objectively and think, how is this, regardless of any preconceived notions? I think that's a great thing to look at because you never know when it's going to be that shell that, with a little bit of tweaking, is going to be crushing the meta tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Except Fog. Fog sucks. That card is bad.
What about Tangle? I think Tangle is okay.
I'm not familiar with Tangle. Explain it to me.
Tangle, when you cast it, you prevent all combat damage that turn, and
Mhm.
you any creatures that attacked that turn stay. They do not untap during their controller's next untap step.
No, that's a sweet card. I mean, it's a good card. That's a tempo play on top of, not doing anything.
Yeah, but Fog itself is just doing nothing.
In my opinion. I mean,
And
unless it's buying you the time to combo off the next turn, then no.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe Manny and I are gonna have to make a video about Fog and Fog effects in
Let's make a
Pauper.
deck with 8 fogs.
They already have those, Manny.
Ew.
Turbo Fog. I'll show you it later.
Okay, sounds
um,
awful. Sounds bad.
it's a good time. It's not fun to play against. Okay, so what we want to take just a break from our content to say right now. We wanted to let you guys know that if you enjoy the content that we are producing here, if you find us entertaining or informative, whatever it may be, you can definitely support us by checking out our Patreon. Go to Common Knowledge on the Patreon website, and you can donate to us. The more that you give to us, while it is certainly not necessary, the more it can help us to produce quality Magic content by giving us kind of the financial backing in our own lives to have the time to spend on making Magic content for you and for the community as a whole.
I mean, I think realistically that money would go towards things like making sure I stop, dropping from the feed all the time. That would be so cool. And and then maybe, I don't know, better mics or things like that.
Yeah, that's probably where it would be going. Definitely to Manny initially, just to kind of figure out whatever that situation is over there.
Yeah, upgrade my internet because Comcast won't stop taking advantage of me. I'll say that.
So, as you can tell, both Spencer and Manny are huge fans of Comcast.
Oh, don't get me
And
started.
speaking of Spencer, our network is the Constructive Criticism Network. We are a podcast that is part of that whole grouping. And that is done by Spencer Howland. He has been fantastic to us. And we really just want to thank him for everything that he has been doing to help this podcast work and giving us the backing and network name to be part of.
Without him, we wouldn't be here. He's a great guy. He's going to be like the next Corleone type godfather of Magic content, I think.
Well, that's a little scary. I hope he does not become like
Yeah, I mean,
Godfather.
hopefully he just makes us like kiss his ring and like doesn't make us saw any horse heads off or anything.
Hopefully, we can only hope. We'll have to check our contracts. Okay. So moving on from there, thank you, Spencer. But we are going to move on to specifically the brews that we have been kind of mentioning throughout this podcast. Manny and I, in these past few weeks, we've kind of built two different brews that we think are excellent examples of how the brewing process can work. Um, one of them, I know I kind of worked on a little bit more than Manny did, while the second one, Manny definitely did a lot of play testing and helped me out a lot there. The first deck we're going to be talking about, though, is Infect. So, this version of Infect that we decided to build, because Infect had been kind of taken out of the meta once Invigorate was banned, we went ahead and took a look at this and decided that mono green probably wasn't the best way to go.
Right. And real quick, we did lose Invigorate, which is, I'm not going to say a debilitating blow, but it was definitely a blow nonetheless. But when we look at, a format like Modern, Tom Ross has excelled playing Infect in Modern as well as Legacy. I mean, it's definitely a deck that has a history of winning. And a very good pedigree that I definitely think we can transplant to Pauper again and tune to get just right without that card.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because when you look at this deck list, it looks very similar to some legacy versions of the deck and some modern versions of the deck, just missing a few cards or some things changed around. What's great is we do have Gataxian Probe in this format, which
so let's go ahead and read off the deck list for them, so they can get an idea of what we're playing.
Okay, so let's do just that. 4 Glistener Elf, 4 Blighted Agent, 3 Distortion Strike, 4 Gataxian Probe, 4 Vines of Vastwood, 4 Groundswell, 1 Spell Pierce, 1 Crop Rotation, 4 Mutagenic Growth, 2 Seal of Strength, 1 Blight Widow, 2 Ponder, 3 Brainstorm, 2 Cyst Bearer, 2 Ranger's Guile, 1 Colony Garden, 1 Soaring Seacliff, 1 Sajiri Step, 4 Evolving Wilds, 5 Islands, and 7 Forests. That makes up the main deck. For the sideboard, we are running 3 Nature's Claim, 2 Spell Pierce, 1 Bajuka Bog, 2 Pulse of Marasa, 2 Cartouche of Strength, 1 Crop Rotation, 1 Mizium Skin, 2 Spreading Seas, and 1 Blight Widow.
Very cool.
So, this deck, obviously, as you can see, it's Simic with a little bit of a focus on the lands. What we were going for when we went Simic was specifically looking to protect our creatures a little bit more and have access to things like Spell Pierce to prevent Edict effects from interfering with our strategy too much.
That, and I think the other half of importance here is Blighted Agent. I mean, that card is incredibly powerful, adds a lot to your creature package as far as infect goes, and is invaluable in that it can be is unblockable.
Yeah, absolutely. The deck does run 3 Distortion Strike to get like Glistener Elf, Blight Widow, and Cyst Bearer through if need be. But if you have Blighted Agent out, you really do not need that other piece of the combo. You just need pump spells, and that's very, very powerful. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, one thing that we kind of pointed out in our past episodes was how much creature removal was out there. And if you look at the deck, and specifically if you're looking at Vines of Vastwood and even Ranger's Guile, that's kind of a concession to exactly how much creature removal there is in this format and how we can't be just ignoring that.
Right. Yeah. Let's see. Are you playing Apostle's Blessing?
I'm actually not. Uh,
Oh,
the reason that I kind of shied away from Apostle's Blessing was that I found that it wasn't that great at protecting my spells, my
okay.
creatures. I found that a lot of the time I preferred to just have Vines of the Vastwood
Sure.
or Ranger's Guile,
Hmm.
or even just a Spell Pierce.
Sure.
And
Sure.
while a lot of people they took out like Distortion Strike and put it in that slot because it could potentially make your creature unblockable, I found that enough decks in this format are multicolored where it wasn't really doing as much as I had hoped.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I mean that's very solid reasoning for your card choice, and I think it's always important to be able, like Kyle just did. So he answered my question. I mean, I'm gonna, he wasn't offended. He had a reason and a logic to why he was playing what he was playing, and I think that's really important when you're brewing a deck, not to be very sensitive about things when your friends or players question your choices, because if you're getting upset about something like that, it means you don't have a good reason for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And when people are looking at your deck and giving you suggestions, it's really not because they want to insult you or they want to pick the mistakes out of your deck. Like, I don't know, maybe Manny wants to do that. Maybe like he's
I,
upset
I
that I
hate
didn't react, but
I
uh,
hate you so much.
I know I'm just the worst. But people are just trying to help, and it makes it a lot harder to brew a good deck when criticism is either taken as an insult or when criticism is done in an insulting manner. I think both of those can be very detrimental to the process,
Oh yeah.
and it's always just something to look out for. Uh, Otherwise, in this deck, the big piece of tech that I do want to point out, and this is actually a kind of more so an answer to Manny's question as well, is the presence of Mizium Skin in the sideboard. And Mizium Skin is the kind of concession to Electrickery because it does give the opportunity to actually save all of your creatures from an overloaded Electrickery. And it does give you that extra opportunity for defending your creatures if that ends up being an issue.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, so going to the main deck a little bit, having played against you, piloting this deck with several different decks, I can say, pretty safely that this strategy, if you're not prepared for it, if you don't have good sideboard cards for it, it's very hard to win. It's a tough matchup when you're not expecting to get blown out by turn 3, sometimes turn 4. It's just something that, it is a combo deck. It's a combo deck that if you're not ready for it, if you don't sideboard for it, if you don't know how to play against it, will be just devastating. Will just bend you over a barrel. I think Kyle's done a really great job in his card selection here. I like that it's very creature heavy, because this format is so removal heavy right now. I think that was a very smart call, and I do love the vines, and the Ranger's Guile. I think they fit in here very well. And between those cards, I mean, I know I've been blown out by this deck several times by a Vines and a Groundswell, and just game over. That was GG. Next one.
Yeah, absolutely. With this deck, just to give kind of an insight on how it was made, uh, I took a lot of time looking at Legacy and Old Modern Infect lists and kind of looked at what our equivalent is in this format, how many pump spells are being played, how many protection spells, things like that. And the part that I'm most proud of actually is the presence of the one crop rotation, because that crop rotation into either a colony garden to protect from edict effects,
Hmm.
a soaring sea cliff to give some kind of evasion, or
Uh-huh.
a Sajiri step to make it so that crop rotation is actually an extra protection spell has been
Right.
absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and little bits of deck tech like that are usually what will win you a game. Just the fact that your opponent, is completely sure that their Chainer's Edict is about to blow you out and you're going to lose the game, and little did they know that they're dead. They're dead already.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, was there anything else that you want to say about this deck, Manny?
Nope, I love it. It's great. It's a good strategy. I would recommend this deck to a lot of people that are either playing Pauper or wanting to get into it. I think it's very good. It can be very difficult to pilot. It seems on the surface that it isn't, but you would be wrong and dumb. um, with these kinds of decks, the reason people like Tom Ross win so well with them is because they're capitalizing on their opponent's mistakes and they're really playing correctly. They're playing 2 to 3 turns ahead. They know what they're doing and they're intimately familiar with this kind of deck. So, it is something you can pick up and play, but it's really going to pay dividends for you if you practice with it and play with it a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Even after just playing it for a few games, you will start seeing a major difference in success rate. Uh,
Yeah.
there is a lot going on in terms of spell ordering and drawing out counter spells, as well as removal at just the right times and knowing when to finally commit to the combo. It can be a little difficult, but it's a very fun deck. And honestly, with the results that I've had with it, I would have a hard time believing that Infect is dead. Um, I've done very well against Stompy, Tron. The hardest matchups are really against the Delver decks. They just pack a lot of removal. But Mono Blue Delver is kind of the matchup that you dream of. If we shift away from is it Delver being the dominant one and have it be Mono Blue Delver, then we'll be a little bit better off with this. Uh,
Hmm.
the lack of Lightning Bolt in that matchup is really what saves you.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure the playset of Vapor Snags isn't going to do much against you.
Yeah, exactly. So, one thing that I do want to mention before we move on is if you guys find any of these deck lists sound interesting, you can find these. We're going to be posting them on our Patreon as well as in our Facebook group after this podcast. So, if you are listening to this after this podcast has happened, then they're there and you should check them out.
Yes.
Okay, so moving on to our next deck list. This is one that Manny and I were just actually playtesting a bit earlier today. Um, so I read the last one, Manny. Would you mind reading through this one?
Not a problem. Just so you guys know before I get started, it is hot fire. You sleeve it up tonight. Okay. 4 Rolling Thunder, 4 Crop Rotation, 4 Ancient Stirrings, 4 Expedition Map, 4 Firebolt, 2 Incinerate, 3 Accomplished Automaton, 4 Ulamog's Crusher, 4 Chromatic Star, 4 Prophetic Prism, 3 Journey to Nowhere, 4 Urza's Mine, 4 Urza's Power Plant, 4 Urza's Tower, 4 Rugged Highlands, 4 Unknown Shores. That's the main deck. In the sideboard, we have 3 Ancient Grudge, 2 Multani's Decree, 1 Circle of Protection Red, 3 Relic of Progenitus, 2 Chainer's Edict, 2 Feed the Clan, and 2 Negate.
Okay, so you guys are aware, this is a red green Tron. Um, if you didn't get that from all of the Urza lands, but Manny, you described this deck as fire. Why is it fire?
Yes. Well, I mean, you're playing 10 burn spells, so it was a play on words. The other fact is that I think the deck is incredibly powerful. So I think the main reasons for wanting to play red green over the blue black nonsense that is garbage is because you have access to things like Ancient Stirrings and Firebolt, Incinerate, and Rolling Thunder. These are very powerful cards that do a lot in this format. I think they really round this out well. we lose things like Pyroclasm, which we make up for with a little bit more spot removal and things like Rolling Thunder. But it also makes your deck versatile. So we're playing 7 giant monsters, 4 Ulamog's Crusher, 3 Accomplished Automaton. One of the things that you designed, I think that's really great, is the Accomplished Automaton being able to bring a 1/1 token into play by itself. I think that's so great to get around Edict effects. Other than that, I mean, it has a 5/7 body with it. It's a monster. It's a 7-drop. You can cast it when turn 3 when you piece together Tron. Ancient Stirrings does a fantastic job at completing Tron or digging for your threats. I think the way the deck works together is very great. I do think we need to play it quite a bit more to polish it, because these numbers are, a little on the round side, where we're playing a lot of play sets of things, and maybe it's correct to get rid of it, 1 copy here and there. But the way it works together is really fantastic. The 3 Journey to Nowheres, I think, threw me off at first, but I began playing the deck, and, playing it, I really wanted 4. And maybe 3 Rolling Thunder, but that's my preference. This is what Kyle has decided he loves. And, that's where we kind of meet, where we'd be playing virtually the same deck, maybe the same 73 of 75. But that Journey to Nowhere is so fantastic in stopping creature-based combos. Is at Blitz, you can shut them down. Delvers, you usually can cast that turn 2 and get rid of it, as well as with Firebolt and Incinerate. I think the removal package here is really very good. It's excellent. I like the versatility of Rolling Thunder to be able to blast your opponent in the face for 9. You can win with this deck solely on burn by itself. You don't even need to rely on your creatures, which are top notch. I just think that this strategy is tried and true, is a monster in Modern, and can definitely be a monster in Pauper as well. It's very intuitive. There are some nuances to it. For instance, when to play crop rotation, what you want to expedition map for. Because you are playing technically 3 colors, you do need to be very decisive in what you're cycling colors for, with Chromatic Star and Prophetic Prism, as well as using your Rugged Highlands, when to use them, and how to use your mana efficiently.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest difference that I had in mind when I was building this deck is I felt that things like Dinrovatron and Marasatron were not consistent enough at getting Tron on the board quickly. And I think that it's a pretty sound argument that the best part about Tron is having Tron. You want to be playing the deck and having Tron, and that's usually when you get your strongest plays. The reason why we have a lot of these play sets is a lot of these cards are just fantastic in how they work, and some of them are really influenced by other sources. One thing that I looked at when I was putting this deck together was the Legacy 12 post decks that people had put together, and they were running 4 crop rotation and 4 ancient stirrings all the time. So it was like, okay, this seems like it might be a good idea. Let's try it out. And I have to say, it really has been really good, because you're usually getting Tron on turn 3 or 4, so you're able to get things like Rolling Thunder down pretty easily at that point and stabilize from there.
Yeah, I agree. The crop rotations, when I was skeptical at first, really did begin to pay dividends. I mean, even at its worst, you can sacrifice something like your Unknown Shores to grab your Rugged Highlands and have your consistent double red mana. It's something that's very easy, as well as the what is it? The Prophetic Prism. I was going to call it something else, but Prophetic Prism also helps quite a lot with making sure you have the right mana at all times. And I mean, with the hardest thing you're casting being Rolling Thunder at double red, it's not very hard at all.
Yeah, the Rolling Thunder has really just been the only part that's difficult to cast, but it's been such a good card, and even against control strategies. I know Manny was telling me that he was playing against a blue-black control deck earlier today, and he ended up getting 13 damage to the face on somebody with Rolling Thunder. So
right, and it may be something where we do love the 4 Rolling Thunder, but we might decide that we want to split 3 Rolling Thunder and 1 Caravix Torch. where
Yeah.
we know what the good cards are in the meta, we know what they do, and if we can possibly cast that for one less, one red less, then maybe that's the route we go. And we try 3-1, or just kind of play with it and have fun.
Yeah, I think at the very least that was something that I was considering putting into the sideboard after playing against some control matchups, because having the extra protection that is on Karavek's Torch, when somebody only leaves up the mana that they need for their counter spell, it can really change the course of a game. So I
Which
think
is
that's
very
a great
often
idea.
Yeah, which very often happens when your opponent is playing Delver, and they only have 16 lands in play. And not to mention they're gushing, they're trying to play nice and tight with their mana and be efficient with it. They're not planning on paying an extra two.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that this deck is really fantastic. If you're looking for a different option in Tron right now, looking for something that plays slightly different or is a little more consistent on getting those lands all on the field, I would definitely consider checking this deck out. I know I like it, and this is probably my go-to version of Tron at this point. But
Yeah,
please feel free to give us feedback on this deck and Infect, and let us know what you think, if there's anything that could be improved, taken out, if you have sideboard ideas, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I love this red green Tron deck. It is so much fun. It plays mostly intuitively. You definitely will need to practice a little bit, but man, if I had a wax stamp, I would give it my wax stamp of approval with my signet ring. Just boom on it.
We'll have to see if Spencer has a signet ring. He seems like the person that would.
Well, he's gonna get one so that we can kiss it.
Obviously. Okay, so anything else that you wanted to say about either of these decks, Manny?
Hot Fire,
Hot Fire, got it.
both of them, so good.
And anything about brewing in general? Any last tips, ideas?
You're gonna suck. You're gonna suck like almost all the time. Do it because you enjoy it. Do it because you like it, and do it because it's something you're passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. This is brewing decks is a fantastic way to learn how decks should go together, and to kind of learn when you just pick up a net deck, even why people made certain choices. It makes it easier to see that. Why
Yes.
it's 3 rather than 4, and why there are 2 of something.
Hmm.
Simple stuff like that. Why it's positioned this way in a meta. Things like that. So it's good even if you aren't necessarily someone who wants to brew tons of decks. I think it's a good idea to be, I don't know, taking a look at it, giving it a shot every once in a while, exercising that part of your Magic brain, because it will influence how you play decks regularly.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there is something to be said for flexing those mental muscles, really understanding how things come together, how you build them. I think being able to build strong and powerful Magic interactions really gives you an insight into the game, how to play it better, and how to better yourself as a player.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. And so the last section that we have for you guys today is kind of an interesting one. We have our Pauper to Prince section one more time. We are going to be talking about a deck that got top 8 in the Pauper Challenge this past Sunday. And
Is this the one I don't like?
no, this is
Okay.
well, this is one that I was pretty low on when we did our combo deck list last combo deck episode last week. We discussed this deck list kind of in passing, and when it popped up on this Pauper Challenge, I have to say I was a little surprised, because I wasn't really thinking that this deck was going to be doing that well with so much graveyard hate out there.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
what we are looking at is Sultai Exhume. I think that it's more so blue-black Exhume, but
Uh-huh.
it is
What's
running
the
one
green?
Fangren and Marauder in the sideboard. So
Okay.
it does get the green in there.
No, I'm gonna strip it. It's just blue black.
Thank you. I actually prefer that. I was giving it the benefit of the doubt. So this deck is kind of your It's not actually. That's a lie. This is not your typical Exhume deck. Most Exhume decks they are playing Ulamog's Crusher as their payoff card. This
Are they
one,
not?
I'm really shocked. They are playing a striped Riverwinder.
Whoa. I mean, we discussed that this might be something that we would see, that it definitely might be coming. I think it's a great call right now, but it's something that can definitely easily be hated out.
I thought that it was such an interesting idea because, well, it's kind of twofold. When I first saw this card being put in decks, I thought that it was against Reanimator decks and that it did a really good job of getting a creature into their graveyard when your opponent went off with Exhume.
Right. Right.
But this is kind of fantastic because what ends up happening a lot of the time is if someone has a Relic of Progenitus on the field and you play Exhume,
Uh-huh.
someone goes ahead and cracks the Relic of Progenitus.
Sure.
And then once that's cracked, you just go ahead and cycle your Striped Riverwinder.
Oh, that is smart. Okay. Well, forget
Like,
everything I said then.
I think that was brilliant. I did not think of
Yeah.
that use of it. And I
It's
think
because
that's why it's seen so much success.
we are dumb and they are smart. It's probably why.
Apparently. Apparently.
Yeah.
We should have our feelings very, very hurt.
Yeah.
The other thing that I find kind of great about this deck is it is running 4 Delver of Secrets and 4 Gurmag Angler. So it's not
Yes!
just relying. Yes, it is running Zombie Fish.
Oh, I
It isn't
love
only
Gurmagging.
relying on. It's not only relying on the Striped Riverwinder, which I think makes the deck phenomenal.
Yes. Versatile and powerful. Yeah, I think Delver and Gurmag Angler they're such best friends. They're so good together. I mean, if we look at Modern, I think about a year and a half ago or so, we were seeing so many Grixis decks, so many Grixis Control, Grixis Midrange, with these guys as their teeth and their fangs, and I think it's such a brilliant and smart idea to port that over to Pauper. Unfortunately, we don't get Tassiger, but still, A plus.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely an A plus. This deck right here and this result has definitely changed how I feel about Reanimator decks.
Mm-hmm.
I was not high on them anymore. I didn't think that they were that great, but Striped Riverwinder might be the card that kind of turns that around. And
Yeah, I mean, how do you in that interaction you just described? How do you beat that?
yeah, exactly. Unless you're running like if you have 2 Relics of Progenitus out on the field, but then that's just overkill. Like that's just
Then you're probably losing anyway.
yeah, exactly. What is great though is definitely that Delver Angler combo because if you took Exhume and Striped Riverwinder out of this deck and threw in some other cards to fill those spots in, this deck would still be pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, then you just you switch those out for possibly some discard and counter magic, and you still have a viable shell.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So this definitely gets my stamp of approval. Not my signet ring, but my stamp of approval. It's like one of those cheap rubber ones.
Okay, yeah, just like the little crappy ink that gets on your fingers.
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
that is our Pauper to Prince of the week. Kudos to that one for bringing Reanimator back. So, I guess our next segment that we were going to do, we were going to talk about what we're playing, but we've been doing so much brewing this past week
I
that
mean,
it's kind of been obvious.
yeah, and it's like sucky and a cop out and cheesy, but I actually really would play Green Red Tron. I would, digitally sleeve that up and take it to everything right now. I love it.
Yeah, I'm absolutely on the Green Red Tron and Infect bandwagon myself. I'm probably just on like a little bit of a high from brewing them and seeing some success.
Yeah,
But I'll
and
probably be streaming them tomorrow when I'm doing that on my Twitch channel. But if I wasn't playing that, I think I would still be on something like Tribe Combo.
I'm a little burnt out, probably mentally taxed from just being very busy these last 2 weeks. So if I wasn't playing Green Red Tron, I'd be on Stompy. I could play that. I could play that deck in my sleep.
Yeah, and Stompy it is
Just,
a good choice. Like if you need that deck that you can play in your sleep, I'm sure that it's probably has more interactions than we sometimes give it credit for, and I'm
I
sure
mean,
somebody will less message me and let me know that. But
hey man, not cool.
which it's probably not cool. Uh, let's go ahead then and move on to our shout outs. Do you have any shout outs that you would like to give today, Manny?
I'm gonna give a shout out to me.
I I give
Rule,
a lot of
rule
credit
number
to that.
rule number one. I'm number one. Okay, continue.
Um, I would like to give a shout out to there is a YouTube channel called Overwatch Dojo. The people that are making those videos are pretty great. Um, the reason that I specifically want to give them a shout out, and I kind of want to give people a recommendation for this video, it's one about dealing with competitive anxiety, which a lot of people deal with, and I know sometimes I get a little stressed out if I've been working on decks for way too long and playing too many leagues and things like that. When it comes time to actually perform in a competition, it can be hard. And they give some pretty good recommendations for online players as well as stuff that can be applied in person. And
Do you
it isn't
think
just
that
strictly Overwatch.
do you think that these lessons on like competitive anxiety, you think they'd be across the board for almost anything?
Yeah, I think that it could probably apply to just about anything because I don't necessarily think that it's just competitive so much as dealing with high anxiety situations that can be perceived as high risk for oneself, whether that be like a job
See.
interview or something like that. I
Okay.
know when I
Yeah.
listened to it, I thought it was pretty cool that, okay, I experienced this and it's nice that people are addressing this problem and kind of validating that it is a thing. So
All right. Very cool.
if you're
Yeah.
looking for a video on that, definitely check out Overwatch Dojo.
I will. I'm gonna look at that based on your validation of it. Your what do you call it? Your stamp of approval again, I guess.
My rubber stamp of approval.
That's it.
So
I'm gonna actually get you a rubber stamp. Everything I said about like better mics and like internet connections, forget about that. I'm spending all the money on rubber stamps
and it's just going to
and
say
signet rings.
approved. So, if you guys like our podcast or are interested in the Constructed Criticism Network, you can subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app or on iTunes itself. If you leave us a review there, that would be great. It really helps us out and it gives us more attention from the community as a whole.
Yes, please share us with everybody if you like us. Not if you hate us. Don't be like listen to these guys, they suck.
Yeah, if you hate us, then just like forget you ever listened to this. Just
Just
like
yeah, don't say bad things about us. Just don't say anything.
exactly. So, that's all that I have for you this week. Is there anything that we forgot, Manny? Any words in parting that you have?
No, to the 5 to 10 people listening to us, thank you very much. It means a lot to us.
Yes, absolutely. It means so much to us that you joined us this week. We will be back next week with some more Pauper action for you. And until
Ooh,
then,
action.
ooh, action. Remember, it's not about the price of your deck, it's about how you play it.
Oh wait.
Bye-bye.
One last
Oh,
thing. One last thing. We have to ask each other a personal, semi-personal question.
oh, oh, I forgot. This is why I asked.
Yeah. Yeah. What's? Come on, hit me. You go first. I got nothing.
Oh gosh, you really put me on the spot. I was already in sign out mode.
I know.
Oh, and I had a list. We went over this
Uh,
last week.
all right. What's your favorite book?
Ooh, favorite book?
Favorite book.
Gosh, like I have to have an answer that's different from last week because the movie that I talked about is also a
Oh,
fantastic book.
don't be that lame. Don't be that lame.
It is a
Okay.
fantastic book.
Something else. Something else. What? Hmm, this is hard. What's your favorite TV show?
It's always sunny in Philadelphia. Gosh,
That's so stupid. That's mine too. All right.
I
Well,
figured that it would be yours. We've talked about
yeah.
this.
All right.
So,
Well, I mean, oh, go ahead. You ask now.
if you were to meet one historical figure, who would it be and why?
um, that's so hard. I don't really have anything good for you. Um, I really don't. I don't really care about meeting anybody from history, and like, which is very strange because I love history and I love learning about history constantly. But I don't care. I don't care about anybody's particular perspective on how they did what they did or why they did it. Um, that's all.
Okay.
I got you're no one. Ah, wait, no, okay.
Oh.
I probably talked to Winston Churchill and kind of what was going through his mind when he was keeping the UK together during World War II. I mean, bleak times.
Yeah, that would be incredibly interesting. So I think next time we will have questions already planned, since we know that this is going to be
This is a big flop.
since this is a known section. So
We should just edit this out.
time, though, yeah, chances are Spencer's going to edit this out. Okay, so until next time, remember, it's not about the cost of your deck. Just remember that part.